Well, good morning and welcome to New Day. Thank you for being here to worship. Well, today is a day in between because 2016 is almost over and 2017 is almost here. And in a few short hours, the experiences we've celebrated this year, the losses we've grieved, the lessons we've learned will all become part of the memories of 2016. And turning the page on a calendar doesn't guarantee that we step into a new year in a life-giving way. And so today we're going to be very intentional as we spend just a memorable and inspiring hour and 15 minutes reflecting on God's goodness this past year. If you're a guest today, thank you for being here. We want you to feel very welcomed and at home at New Day. Let's pray together as we begin worship. Our Father, you have been our help in the past, and you've always been our hope for the future. We just pray that you would open the eyes of our hearts to see you as we worship and as we reflect on your goodness and leading in our past. And we just pray that as we step into a new year, that your will would be done here among us as it is in heaven. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Good morning, church. Happy Sabbath. Thank you so much for choosing to worship with us on your last day of 2016. And I invite you to stand with us as we sing our first song.
Singing Christmas songs this year? Oh, good, because we're going to sing some more.
to have you together to worship on this last day of 2016. You know, this week between Christmas and New Year has become one of my favorite weeks of the year. Really, it's become kind of a cultural, it's a different week than any other week, really, for us as Americans. It's this time between. You know, it's the time between Christmas and New Year. We've been through the Christmas holiday, and now we're kind of looking forward to the New Year and the New Year celebration. And can we just say that nothing really gets done this week, right? I mean, this is the most unproductive week in our culture. Nobody goes to work. If you go to work, you don't do anything. You're just like scrolling Facebook. We know that, right? So this is just a weird week. It's a time between. A time of looking back, a time to look forward. And a time between is something very familiar to those who we read about in the pages of the Bible. You know, Moses and the Israelites had a very famous time between as they came out of Egypt and the plagues, and they passed through the Red Sea, and they stood there on the shore of the Red Sea, and they looked back on a life of slavery, and they were looking forward to the promised land. It was a time between. And Jesus experienced a time between the night before he was crucified as he gathered with his followers in an upper room in the heart of Jerusalem, and he looked back on the fruit of his ministry, the men surrounding him, the people surrounding him, and he looked forward to the cross and eternity. It was a time between. And I don't know if you have year-end traditions, but I hope that it's a part of your life that as you come to the end of a year, this time between, that you have the tradition of looking back and reflecting on God's work in your life over the last 12 months. Looking back and saying, what has God done in me? What has God done through me? What has God carried me through the last 12 months? How has he provided for me? How has he grown me in my generosity? How has he grown me in my ability to love others? How has he grown me in my ability to love him? Today, I've asked 7 of our fellow Christ followers who attend New Day to share a brief story about how they have experienced God over the last 12 years. They're going to be reflecting, and as they reflect, I hope that you would be reflecting, that part of their story would maybe intersect with a part of your story. Now, I've asked them to share transparently, and that's not always easy to do in front of a group of a lot of people, many of whom you don't know. And a lot of these people you won't know, because most of those who will be sharing today are pretty new to New Day. And so I've asked them to introduce themselves. But please lean in and listen and give them your full attention and applaud them for their courage as they stand before you and share their testimonies on how God spoke to them and in them and through them in 2016. So to begin with, I would like to introduce you to the very new Mrs. Engelmeyer. Annika is going to lead us off. Annika Engelmeyer, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
Take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As he said, my name is Annika Engelmeyer, and 2016 actually began for me on December 21st of 2015, when my last name was still Severin. Long story short, Jason Engelmeyer proposed to me on December 21st, and needless to say, I said yes. The time after that was a whirlwind of sharing it with my families and friends, booking a wedding venue and meeting wedding vendors, compiling guest lists, and dreaming up this big day. Things seemed to be going smoothly, so Jason and I decided to pursue the idea of buying a house that we could move into after the wedding. We printed out about 200 letters and went knocking on every door in our desired neighborhood asking, are you going to move? Or do you know anyone who is? And 5 days later, we were under contract on a house that was 2 minutes walking distance from my sister's house. The excitement was almost unbearable. Home buying to me was like learning to speak a foreign language, though. After finishing up wedding planning for the day, we would often stay up till midnight making hefty decisions about the house and to sign on the dotted line at least 100 times. The mental to-do list in my head was growing by the hour, and sleep was diminishing on a nightly basis. Once we closed on the house, at the end of May, the projects began. Not only were we creating centerpieces for the wedding and bridal party gifts, we were now fixing up our house so it was ready for us in July. Included in this process was testing for asbestos, scraping our popcorn ceilings, testing for asbestos again. The results of the second test came back as 10 times the legal amount of asbestos spilled in our home as a result from scraping our popcorn ceilings. At this time, you might be able to imagine how I am feeling. Words that come to mind are stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. I was in desperate need of some peace and quiet, to come back to the purpose of this season and to be present in our engagement. While scrolling through Pinterest, as I often did during the wedding planning season, the verse from Exodus 14 came on my screen. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And that was it. That was the key, to stop moving, stop fighting, doing, controlling, and just be. Relent, breathe, trust, and be still. And so I finally got back to my routine that I had slipped out of the last few months, waking up before work to read, journal, and drink my cup of tea, carving time out of our very busy week to go to yoga, and reminding myself to keep breathing deeply, even when big decisions and financial burdens presented themselves. So once we got the results of our second asbestos test, the decision was made to abate our home, which expended all of our emergency savings. This took place in mid-July, which pushed back our hardwood and carpet installation to the week of our wedding. Meantime, Jason and I were packing up all of our belongings, renting a moving truck, and moving everything into our new garage at the house. We moved in the last box as we headed up the mountain to Estes Park to celebrate our wedding weekend. But this entire process felt much different. While it might sound relentlessly stressful, it was actually very doable. I put one foot in front of the other, moved forward calmly, slept at night, and continued to journal and breathe. It was a trying time, but I was constantly reminded that I need only to be still, that the Lord would provide and would do the fighting for me. There are not enough words to explain the beauty of our wedding weekend in Estes Park. We were surrounded by our family and friends, the stunning Rocky Mountains encompassed us, and I got to marry the most wonderful man I know. When we returned from our honeymoon, Jason and I got to work moving into our new home with new floors and no asbestos, and begun our life together. We were just starting to figure out our dance of living together when I was offered a new job. For the month of September, I explored the idea of this new job, revamped my resume and cover letter, and went through a 4-hour interview with 11 different people. A week later, I was officially offered the job and became the neonatal intensive care unit nurse educator at Presbyterian St. Luke's. So in the span of 1 year, I have planned a wedding, bought a house, completed some major house projects, experienced significant financial stress, got married, joined my life with Jason's life, and started a new job. Since that day of scrolling through Pinterest and finding this verse from Exodus, I have been able to walk a little more steadily through the second half of 2016. The idea of being still is very difficult for me, for I tend to be more like the Energizer Bunny. But at the very essence of being still is a connection with Christ that keeps me calm and helps me to trust that I am right where I am supposed to be. What a relief that I do not have to do the fighting, deciding, or controlling. The Lord will fight for me. I need only to be still.
Hi, I'm Greg Temple. I was baptized a year and a half ago, so this is pretty fairly new to me. And 2016 was the first full year that I made a commitment to learn about God and to be with God and have Him part of my life. So during my daily devotion and talking to God and prayers, I asked God to put love and kindness in my heart. And in answer to that, He sent me to Africa. Before I went, I sponsored a child, a little girl named Jocelyn, and I picked her because she had such a large family and 2 parents that had AIDS. So I wanted to help her. And I went down to Africa with the group of people that met some new friends, and went to Africa and met Jocelyn's family and all of your sponsored kids' families. And I was just overwhelmed with the love and the gratitude that those families show for us. I couldn't believe how much they love us for what we do down there. And that was, to me, God opening my eyes and my heart to love and kindness. And I've made it a point that that's what I want to do. I want to help other people. And that's my plan looking forward to do a lot more of that, to help people. And that's my plan for 2017, is to do more of that. And I want to thank Dave for everything you've done for me to get me here. And I know it seems late, but better late than never. I also want to thank my large small group for all they've done for me too. And I look forward to 2017 and hope I can be a better person next year than I am this year.
Hi there. I'm Nikki Strother, and I'm kind of new to Newday also. Am I echoing? I'm new to the church too. I've been coming here for about 4 or 5 years. My kids came before I did. You know Crystal, who sings for you, and Kevin used to play the bass. Um, excuse me. I have that cold that everyone is running from. And so I got an email from Pastor Dave that said, "Will you share?" And my first thought, of course, at this time of year was Christmas cookies. And so then I actually read the email, and it was that different sharing, and I thought, well, that's good too. Um, and then I saw the 3-minute part, and I thought maybe I'll just bring cookies. And that, but in thinking, this year was pretty rough for me, my family, and we had a lot of challenges, and I was trying to isolate them, what to, which one where I could, make a difference. And one bizarre incident just kept coming up, and I thought, I kept pushing it away because it was so strange. And I thought, they all think I'm strange anyway. I shouldn't prove it. But so it just kept coming up, and I thought, okay, well, maybe maybe God is telling me that I need to share this because it was so strange. And a lot of you know, I had brought my dad, who was 95 this last year, to church, and I had been taking care of him for 5 years through what had started out as mild senility, and it kind of morphed into full-blown dementia, which was just heartbreaking. And it was a struggle for all of us. And the final weeks of his life, though, were just so hard because he had broken his hip, and he could not put together in his mind, because of the brain fog of the dementia, he just couldn't tell, no matter how many times we told him the pain in his hip and the wheelchair went together. He just couldn't understand it. And it was like we were being mean to him to make him sit in a wheelchair. And the doctors and the nurses and the hospice staff had already told me that this was not an injury that he was going to recover from. And so I was just kind of, overwhelmed with the sadness of that. And the pain meds that they gave him to keep him comfy and calm, they sort of thickened the brain fog so that he couldn't understand what was going on. But I visited him every day. I was there every single day with him. And so one night after work, I had been sitting with him for several hours and convincing him that no one had poisoned his food by going, 1 for me, 2 for you, just to get him to eat. And he all of a sudden looked at me, and he seemed to become lucid. And he started telling me about some new people who had come to visit him. And he kind of described them real vaguely, and we chatted, and he told me that he thinks one was a guy, one was a girl, and it immediately occurred to me that he was talking about the people in Scrubs, that he couldn't quite tell who was who. He had macular degeneration. And then all of a sudden he started telling me they were secret people who were going to help him get out of the hotel he thought he was living in. And I assumed that, again, these were just the caseworkers, and he wasn't, he just wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. And I started getting ready to leave after his nighttime meds had taken effect. And I tucked him in, and he started to drift off, and then he stopped me, and he sleepily mumbled, and he went, "Oh, say goodnight to one of my new friends. They're right there in the corner." And I kind of turned around because I didn't hear anyone come in the room. And I didn't hear anyone come into the room because no one had. We were the only 2 people in the room. And so I kind of turned to the empty corner with a hint of sarcasm in my voice, going, "Yeah, good night. Thanks for coming to visit my dad." And I tucked him in, and he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, "You're talking to the wrong corner." And then he kind of drifted off. And I just immediately assumed that he was now having full-blown hallucinations. And I was just overwhelmed to the point of tears. And I don't even remember leaving the building. I kind of like barreled down the hallway to get out to my car, just sobbing. And I got out to the car, and I got out of the building, and it was snowing, of course, and I'm crying, and it's sticking to my face. And I got halfway to my car, just with weird thoughts in my head, just kind of going, "This is wrong. This is so unfair." And then one thought popped into my head, and it just stopped me cold. And this thought came into my head from nowhere, and I went, "Dad's talking to angels." And it just, I mean, literally stopped me cold. And this is not a thought I would ever have come up with. Hallucinations I am familiar with, angels not so much. And I mean, I actually blurted out to the parking lot at large, "No way." And then I thought, who am I talking to? There's one car in the parking lot. It's mine. There's nobody out here. And I thought, okay, the stress is really getting to me. And so I got in my car, and I realized that I was no longer crying. And I had just absolutely the most peaceful, warm feeling, like the air was hugging me. And I just like, was like, okay. All of a sudden, I was okay. And I have absolutely no idea who or what my dad saw up in the corner of his room. That corner, not that one. And I didn't hear any voices. I didn't fall on my face, and no one told me, "Do not be afraid." Okay, but I wasn't. That was the whole point, is I wasn't as sad. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't as overwhelmed. And I knew that my dad wasn't crazy. Neither am I. But I just couldn't see his angels. And it just felt like God sent the Holy Spirit just to give me a hug when I needed it. Just the air was hugging me.
Well, you can just imagine I walked up, and now I can say, "Hi, I'm Steve." Um, and it was funny. Dave knows a little bit more of my story than most of you do, and he said, "Yeah, would you like to give your testimony?" But just about this year, because you got 3 minutes, not 30. But just as a preamble to my testimony, over the last 10 years, I've been a completely introverted, socially deprived hermit, which I'm sure a lot of you can imagine that because I'm such an introvert naturally. And really over the last 10 years, God went through a culling process in me of stripping away all of my beliefs so I could find my faith. And it's been extremely difficult to the point where, there have been times where I was so angry at God that I didn't want to believe that there was a God. And this is within the last 2 or 3 years. And I was desperately, because I'm a logical person who has to have things in a row in order to move forward with a particular belief. I was really trying hard to strip away the idea that there was a God. I really wanted to believe that. There wasn't. Because in my mind at the time, with everything I was going through, and I could share that some other time, but it would have been so much easier for me to just do my own thing and crawl into a bottle or something like that. But over the last 2 years, God allowed everything in my life to get stripped away and to bring me back to, I exist, deal with it. Which was peaceful and challenging at the same moment. And over the last couple of years, he's been putting pieces back together until this year. Now, just so you guys know, I haven't been involved in music for a decade, which was my life, going through college, going through my teenage years. I had not been connected with church at all. Church back 7, 8 years ago had been a very damaging thing. A lot of judgment, a lot of people coming and telling you that you're doing something wrong when they didn't even ask you any questions, and church had become a place of hurt or fakeness. Everybody had their plastic smiles. Oh, welcome to church. We're so glad you're here. And, that was like the 5th Sabbath you've been there, and they don't remember your name, and it's like you're a brand new visitor. Oh, do you have family here? No, I told you last 3 Sabbaths they don't have family here. But thanks for asking. And it got to the point where it's just easier not to go to church. And so 2 years ago, God took me through the process of I exist, deal with it, and I care about you, deal with it, and I'm a good father, deal with it. And then this year, God did something different. He sent me you. And I'm going to hold it together through this. But God sent me people in this church who had eerily similar experiences to mine, who had eerily well-timed insight into exactly what I was going in that moment. And through you guys, God brought me back to church. He brought me out of just a single solitary hermit relationship with him into the body again. And so I want to thank you guys and encourage you as we're going into 2017. People are going to come through those back doors that need to be brought back into the family. Just keep being you, because God used you guys to bring me back home. So thank you.
Sharing stories, all these testimonies. You can sense there's a unity right now as we are getting insight into our own church members. So at this time, let's sing together about Emmanuel, the God who is with us. And we would also like to take up offering at this time, so we can invite our deacons up. And just sing with us.
morning, church. My name is Robert Olonde. As my wife says, it's like saying a long day, but with an O at the beginning. And that's my beautiful wife over there. Her name is Raquel. So this year has been full of blessings and many revelations to me. I started the year 2015. I started the year on a wheelchair after undergoing surgery on both legs. I suffer from a condition that the doctors are yet to determine what it is, but they call it an idiopathic myopathy, where I just cannot recover after I exercise. My muscles cannot recover well, so I'm always in pain. So, for those of you who know my story, I was in the Air Force as of the 28th of December. So, 20th of December, before that I was in the Air Force. The procedure that I went through was to help alleviate pain, and I was going to be evaluated. So I went through what you call Air Force Medical Board to determine if I'm fit to stay in the United States Air Force. So the procedure was to help alleviate pain, but also determine if I was going to be retained in the Air Force. At the same time, in the beginning of this year, just like my physical body, I was on a spiritual wheelchair. And spiritual things or keeping the Sabbath were not a priority to me at all. I had grown weary of being around Christians, if I may borrow Steve's words, fake Christians, and had lost trust in Christians due to some bad experiences I've had in the past. However, that has changed because of many things that have happened through the year of 2015. This year, I have found peace, and I'm learning to forgive, and I understand the different stages that people are in the walks of lives. So I'm also learning not to be judgmental and embracing and just loving everybody where they are in their Christian life. In July of this year, during our church hopping adventure, my wife and I have gone to all the churches there is in Denver, Aurora, Boulder, probably not just Colorado Springs. So my wife found out about Newday through a friend, and we decided to visit the church the following Sabbath. We had a good experience on our first Sabbath at Newday and decided to come again the following Sabbath, which never happens with more churches. We only went once and we were gone. But there was something different here in Newday because we have been regulars ever since. One other thing is the Newday small groups has also been a major factor in my spiritual life, and I have seen God reveal himself through the group members and the weekly discussions that we always have with the leadership of Pastor Dave and his wife Kim. And I would like to say I always look forward to attending the weekly group meetings, and I do my best not to miss, no matter how much snow there is. We are always there. Thanks to my wife as well. She's always, pushing me. I'm one of those guys that will be like, oh, we don't need to go today. We can, stay home. But thank you, Raquel, for being there. And then, so fast forward in late September, this September, I received my evaluation results from the United States Medical Board, United States Air Force Medical Board, and they had determined that I was unfit to stay in the United States Air Force and recommended to be medically retired. That meant I needed to find a new job. So I went job hunting, and again, for some reason, God still favors me, no matter how much I ran. In the mid-December, I was given a job offer, which I accepted, and I'm really thankful for that. Being around people here at Newday who have embraced me has enhanced my spiritual growth experience, and I have grown closer to Christ than I was at the beginning of this year. So I do thank all of you who have welcomed us, my wife and I, into your homes, and many of you have. those of you who have shared with us. And that I like the church members to know goes a long way. And it has made people like me who have been fighting the existence of God, just like you, Steve, to be able to be humbled and just come back and enjoy the fellowship of fellow Christians. So in conclusion, this year has again been full of blessings and a learning experience for me, and I look forward to 2017. I'll also like to leave you guys with the book Philippians 4:13, which I memorized when I was a very little boy back in Pathfinders. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katie Mctavish. For those of you who don't know me, I have grown up in Newday my entire life, so I am so blessed to call this place my church family. 2016 was a year that changed my life. In 2016, I graduated from high school, I started college, and started living on my own. That's a lot of change in 1 year. But mostly in 2016, my life changed because I fell in love with Jesus. I have been growing up in Newday, growing up in a strong Christian home, I have always known who Jesus is. But this year, I decided that I wanted to seek him for my own. So today, I'm going to tell you that when you do seek Jesus, you will find him. Instead of making a typical New Year's resolution at the beginning of this year, I started with choosing a word that I wanted to represent the year. And I had sat there and prayed and wondered, okay, God, like, what do you want? And different words had popped up into my mind, of love or joy or whatever it was. But then I sat there and it suddenly came to me that I need to listen to God. And so the word that defines this year for me is listen. And listening to God has radically changed my life. I have learned that when you do listen to God, he does speak, and if we are just willing to hear him. Psalm 46 is a passage where God says, "Be still and know that I am God." When looking at the context before, it says, "God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging." First of all, this is like who our God is. He's a refuge in trouble. But also, God doesn't ask us to be still when everything is peaceful, but he asks us to be still and know that he is God when the world is falling apart and the mountains are falling into the sea. That really, this passage really spoke to me this year, as there was many times where I felt like the world was falling apart, or that the mountains in my life were falling into the sea. And it was hard for me to sit back and know that he is God and that he is good. But when I did spend the time to actually listen to him, I have found that he does so speak. And this year I've learned that God speaks through many different forms. I've never directly heard the voice of God, but in times of prayer, I know that the Holy Spirit is speaking through his people, and most importantly, his word. And even like the other people that spoke today, I so strongly feel like God just speaks through them. And I've learned so much to just listen to others while they speak about the Lord. In addition to listening to God, I learned the importance of accountability and reading his word. I go to Colorado Christian University, where this semester I joined a Bible study with 5 other young women, with a lady named Mary Lynn, who meets with us weekly to help disciple us. And that has changed so much, because having that accountability has really just helped me grown, and especially loving accountability, where they meet you exactly where you're at, and but they want to help you grow. So I really recommend, if that's not something you have, like Rob shared, the small groups, things like that, that's something that is amazing. And then truly just diving into the word, because the word of God is powerful. And this year my mind changed, of instead of just reading this book just because, but to read it in a way that this is written to transform our lives. And so if you read it through those eyes, it it so does, and my life has been so transformed. Overall, this year has been one of daily falling in love with Jesus. Matthew 7:7 says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you." This was true for me this year, and it can be true for you too. I could talk for so long about all that I've learned about Jesus this year, his peace, his love, his grace. But mostly that started with me listening to God and seeking him. So I can just tell you that when you seek Jesus, you will find him.
Good morning, church. My name is Billy Hon Gates. If many of you don't know me, I was baptized July 9th by Pastor Dave, and my 2016 has been a massive year for me. I can honestly say that I am extremely proud to be a Seventh-day Adventist and what we all stand for and what we believe, and the community that this church has given me has gone far beyond any of my expectations. So my story starts around September, the biggest part of my story. And I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was currently a staff accountant, got a very big job offer, and it all just came crashing down on me, this feeling of hopelessness and unfulfillment, no motivation, no joy in life, and no meaning. When it came crashing down, my girlfriend Chelsea Foster, who actually introduced me to Adventism, we went on a really big walk that started a series of events that is ultimately going to change my life. Was that a minute? I was trying not to cry before a minute, but it's not going to happen. So on this walk, I was really close. So on this walk, I was just asking Chelsea about, she's grown up with this her whole life. How do you find fulfillment in life and meaning in life when, something like your job, you just don't find any of that? And she just said, you have to give it all to God. And it's like, how? That doesn't answer my question. How do I do this? And her quote, and I will never forget it, is you need to pray for God's will no matter the cost. Very heavy for me to hear. So with that walk, I decided to start a reading plan. And in that reading plan, I started in Romans. And in the study Bible I received, you get previews of all the chapters. And in that, it was talking about Paul. And in that message, what was written on there was Paul not only found reconciliations for his sins, but he found fulfillment, motivation, and joy. Words that directly spoke to me. And I was so overwhelmed with what those words were giving to me that my first thought was, hey, I'll just be a pastor. Let's just do this. Pretty easy, right? And I ended up being in this massive conflict with, what do I want to do? How am I going to find fulfillment? And I externally processed with Pastor Dave, with Chelsea's family, with my family, and I have decided to become a pastor. And I will attend Southwest University. Thank you. Yeah. It was an extremely difficult decision to make, one that brought me to sickness, really. Just trying to figure out if I want to make this commitment, and I do. So Chelsea and I are leaving on Tuesday, and we're driving down to Texas, and I'm going to start my theology program down there, which is pretty exciting. And through this whole process, since I kind of started my decision and telling everyone, I heard a sermon by David Astrick, and in that sermon he says, if Christianity is false, I want to know, but if Christianity is true, I want everyone to know. And with me, I know in the deepest parts of my heart that Christianity is true, and it's my mission to try and tell everyone about the love of God. Thank you.
Whew. I'm so incredibly proud of all of you for sharing. Thank you so much. And I know that there are so many other stories in this church among just wonderful, amazingly deep people who are walking with Jesus. It's awesome to hear those stories. You know, as I mentioned earlier, Jesus also had this time between, this time of looking back and looking forward. It was the night before he was crucified. And again, he had looked forward to having this dinner with his disciples. And I just imagine those guys sitting around the table and reminiscing about the last 3.5 years together and the miracles they had seen together. And Jesus is just in that moment, looking back, reflecting on the work of God as we've just done. But at the same time, he's also looking forward because he knows in just a few hours what's going to be asked of him. The Garden of Gethsemane, all of the sin being loaded onto him and whatnot, and ultimately the cross. But in the middle of that time between, we have this passage that I think is so relevant for us today. As we are in this time between 2016 and 17, I want to read it to you and then explain kind of the relevance. But it's in John chapter 13. Just listen to the time tension in this passage as Jesus is talking. You just kind of hear him looking back and looking forward. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who are in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So, he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not now realize what I'm doing, but later you'll understand." "No," said Peter, "you will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no part with me." "Well then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." So here again, we have Jesus in this time between, and he's going around, he's reminiscing, they're looking back, they're looking forward. And he does this very significant thing in washing his disciples' feet, telling them it's like a bath. And you know, as we all think about 2016, I know that there are parts of the year, things that we've experienced that we want to take with us into the new year. New relationships formed, people who have blessed us, memories that we have had that have enriched us, things that have grown us. We want to take that into the new year. But also, if we're honest with ourselves, there are parts of 2016 that we just want to leave in 2016. Hurts that have been done to us, ways that we have hurt others, ways that we have been betrayed, loss that we have experienced, sins that we have committed, things that we have done that we're not proud of, places where we have gone that we know we shouldn't have, whatever it may be, there are things that we want to leave in 2016, and we have the opportunity to do just that today, this last day of 2016, because of the work of Jesus and the gospel. You know, just by following Jesus' example of washing one another's feet, he said it was like taking a bath, having everything washed away. And wouldn't it be great to go into the new year? Wouldn't it be great to go into 2017 knowing that you are clean? That every mistake that you've made in 2016 and before, that every sinful, shameful thought, word, thing that you said, thing that you've done, whatever, it's all gone. That you have a clean slate for the new year. That's the opportunity that we have this morning. And we're going to actually do that by faith, by following Jesus' example. of washing one another's feet, because he went on to say, you know what, I've done this for you. Now if you do it for one another, follow my example, you'll be blessed. And we believe that. It's like taking a bath. So in a minute, we're going to just like take 10 minutes and have this like interactive part of our service where we're going to we have water and we have towels. And maybe there's someone that you would want to say, you know what, let's do this together. Let's wash away all of the stuff of 2016 together, and let's just together go into the new year knowing that we're completely clean. And so I'm going to pray, and in a moment I'm going to say, just turn to someone next to you, find someone across the room, maybe someone you know, someone you don't know, and say, let's do this together. Let's step into 2016 clean. Now, if this is way too weird for you, maybe you're like, you know what, I'm just going to sit this one out. That's okay too. But just use this as a time of reflection. Don't talk to the person next to you if you're not going to just sit and just reflect. How has God grown me? What do I want to leave behind in 2016? We're going to just take 10 minutes to do that now. I'm going to pray, walk out the center doors, get some water, get a towel, come back in here, wash one another's feet, say a prayer if you want, and then we're going to kind of end the service by taking the Lord's body and blood into us as we head into 2017.